Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Supply Chain Saga. I'm Mark Taylor, the co-founder and CEO of Warehouse Republic, a third-party logistics company that specializes in e-commerce. Today, I'm interviewing BJ Patterson. BJ is the founder and CEO of Pacific Mountain Logistics, a full-service 3PL located in San Bernardino, California. BJ is highly respected in the industry, and I'm excited to have him on the show. So let's get started. Yeah, they've made getting into podcasting and everything like that extremely, very, very easy.
It's really cool. I wouldn't even know where to start.
Yeah, so a little bit of the fun little, they've even got this thing set up to have intro music, little noises.
So that's how they do all that stuff.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, it's funny. It's good. Yeah. Got a lot of all the good stuff.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
This one, it runs off of a little micro SD card in the back. And then it allows you to set just basically everything. You can...
That is so cool.
Yeah. So anyway, well, let's get going.
Great.
Thank you for being here. I'm happy we're able to make this happen.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and start with just go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm BJ Patterson. I'm the CEO and founder of Pacific Mountain Logistics. We're a third-party logistics company based in San Bernardino, California, the Inland Empire, logistics mecca of the universe.
Yep. I would also say the best operator I have the pleasure of knowing and meeting.
Thank you. Thank you for that. It's kind of funny. I always say that, you don't find logistics finds you. Not too many kids are sitting there in their high school class saying, man, I can't wait to be a logistician someday.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, wow, 32 years later, you're like the old man on the block.
So with that said, how did it find you?
It's really funny. It as a temp job. It's really true. I had gotten out of the military, had done some other stuff, and quite frankly, I was going through a divorce and I was lining up another job. It was going to take me back overseas, and a friend called me and said, "Hey, could you help me out?" The guy I was in the service with and called me up and said, "Can you help me out?" I said, "What's that?" And he said, "I need you to work in a warehouse for me." Warehouse? I don't know anything about a warehouse. My vision of a warehouse at that time was some tin building with a bunch of diesel forklifts running around in it. And long story, but he talked me into it. I went and talked to him. It was Target, their Fontana 1.3 million square foot distribution center in Fontana, California. And they needed someone to work Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday night. He said, "Hey, you're divorced. You don't have a life. So why don't you work those nights?" I said, well, I'm never going to have a life if I work those nights. It's just a temp job, just 4 months.
Right.
So 4 months turned into 6 years and kind of got me addicted to the whole logistics thing.
1.3 million square feet. And this is what, 1989, 1990?
No, 92.
92? Okay.
Yeah.
So 1.3 million back in that time was as big.
It was big. It was one of the few million square footers on the West Coast at the time. There were a few, but not very many. You could count them on two hands at the most. There just weren't very many around. And they all had names like Target or Walmart, or Kmart on them. That's the only ones that had those bigger buildings at the time. It was, it's kind of funny too, is that we bragged that we had 18 miles of conveyor, in there. And so, in today's environment, it was so arcane. But at the time, it was state of the art. Everything we were doing was state of the art stuff. And it's kind of funny to go look at today's warehouses, and while they've changed in some aspects are exactly the same. They haven't changed at all.
Give me some of this has really changed, this has not changed at all?
Well, if you go to your what I would call your shipper warehouses, right? Your Target's warehouse, the thing that hadn't changed is the sorting and the way they manage that. The things that have changed is much more flow through inventory, not as much stock inventory. Obviously the pandemic taught us that maybe they should stock a little more. But yes, it's much more flow through, much more just in time today than it was back then. Back then, when it was primarily pull stock, mostly going to stock and then pulling from stock to fulfill and to supply the stores. Whereas now it is, very little pulls from stock. Majority of it just comes in on a truck, goes straight out.
Mm. And so the ultimate storage ending up being the retail location itself.
Yeah.
And so it's like, that's kind of your store. And
actually, if they work it the way they would love it, the store is the ship that it's on, the truck that it's on. That transition is the storage, and just think of it as a pipe, right? So that supply chain, everybody calls it supply chain, and the best terminology would be the supply pipe. Think of it as a pipe, and they're constantly feeding the one end of the pipe, and you're hoping that the flow out the other end is the same flow that sales. It's at the rate of sales. So ideally, the pipe, this flow, that's your storage, ideally. Now, again, that works great until there's a disruption, a pandemic.
Sure,
it just so happens to happen, and so now you've got this pandemic, and now, oh my gosh, I don't have anything in storage, and everybody wonders why. Oh my gosh, we're out of everything. Well, because we didn't really plan. Because you can kind of take that back to 2008, when the Lehman Brothers, everything went off the cliff in 2008. All these retailers got caught with so much inventory. They became inventory shy. So what was, quote unquote, just in time, which really wasn't, we jokingly said just became just late. Everything now is just late. So and to some degree, prior to 2008, retailers had a very, very low tolerance for out of stock. That's all they focused on. They didn't care what it cost them. They didn't want a bare shelf in a store. Now you go to stores today, with a few exceptions, but not many, and you see the amount of inventory in the stores is so much lower, and they have a much higher tolerance to out of stocks, because then they just direct you to your website. Just buy it online. You don't have it here today. So they've cut down the number of SKUs in the stores, and they've limited their inventory in stores and pushed that back upstream to these warehouses that were sitting half empty. And now they've pushed that back upstream and trying to force people to buy online and buy through that channel rather than through the store.
So it's interesting. So when you think of it as the pipe, then the container ship is a part of the storage. Mm-hmm. The sortation warehouse is a part of the storage. The trucks taking it from the warehouse
is part of the storage.
So that actually becomes, the entire thing.
Think of it as your rolling warehouse.
Right.
The ship, that's that's your storage. It's that container on that vessel, that's all storage, it's temporary storage.
Right. So backing up a little bit, how'd you go from 4 months to 4 years and then a career?
Well, I think, a couple things. First off, I think logistics is addicting. Particularly if you're a problem solver. If you like to solve problems, logistics is an awesome way to do it. That's what you do. If you're working in warehousing or trucking or any other aspects of it, you're constantly solving problems. Mm-hmm. And the person that is most successful is the one that can solve the most problems. Mm-hmm. And so, working at Target, I just became addicted to this problem solving. And I was successful. I got promoted quite a bit there. And then I did the unthinkable and worked with Walmart after that, which is almost like, an American going to work, or actually more like a Soviet going to work for America. I think that's the way they looked at it, like some Soviet spy, because they used to work for Target.
How many years was it before you could go back to your Target colleagues and have a polite cup of coffee?
It was the Walmart people that treated me crappy, very frankly. The Target people, like, man, those guys are weird over there. But yeah, the Walmart people I was working, they kept acting like I was still with Target or something. Like I was there to steal their secrets. And you work that retail, but I always had an entrepreneurial bent to me. I like that, and you can only go so far in corporate logistics. Walmart, Target. in order to keep things consistent throughout the organization, look, here's how we do it. Don't change it. And that just didn't fit me. So I got myself into the third party side of it, working for NFI. And that's when you learn the entrepreneurial side of it, how to make money at this and how to solve those problems, but do it in a profitable way rather than just solving them to solve them.
So what was it like going from the behemoth of, like you said, the corporate logistics where, look, you're going to get promoted if you execute our process better than anybody else executes the process, to then getting, were you recruited to NFI?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then being recruited into this entrepreneurial environment and they say, okay, we want you to help look for how to do this better.
Yeah, it's so much better. I look back and it's just so much more fun.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate. I worked for a big 3PL that, gave me a lot of latitude. They did. I mean, they expected everyone, particularly at my level, to be entrepreneurial and to look for ways and how to do it better and how to do it, more cost effectively and quite frankly, how to get revenue out of it, how to do that. And the other thing is, you go to, even though, the company at NFI, that's who I was working for, I mean, it was a big company, but still they got you involved and you were able to get involved in all kinds of other aspects of the business that typically at a corporate, it's either your job or it's not your job.
Right.
It's like corporate real estate. They have real estate people. They would never, ever, ever talk to an operator about a real estate solution. Whereas you go to a 3PL and like, hey, we need another building. Well, you better go find one. Yeah. You know what I mean? You learn about leases. You learn about all these other aspects of the business that if you're in that corporate world, you just don't get it's very rare that you get to touch all those different pieces of the deal.
Yeah.
So, and again, this, you go back to the original thing of problem solving. So it takes problem solving to a new level because now you're able to learn how to, make things, again, profitable. I mean, and entrepreneurial and learn new ways to create revenue streams and look for new problems to solve. And now you're working with clients. Okay, how can I help this client? I mean, the best way to make money is to make your client look like a hero, right? So you look at that, whoever you're dealing with, the VP of logistics for a company or the purchasing, whoever they are, if you approach every day as my goal is to make that guy a hero in his company, then I'm golden. I'm golden with them. And now every time he has a problem, he calls me. I become the subject matter expert. He calls me, and every time he calls me with a problem, that's a potential revenue stream for me. He don't want him calling a consultant. I don't want him calling somebody else. I want him to call me.
Right.
Call NFI, call BJ, and say, look, I want to, I have this problem. How do I solve it? And you say, okay, I got this. I can call my trucking partners. I can call this guy. I can call that guy. We got this for you. Don't worry about it.
So when you're dealing with somebody inside a company, like let's say it's somebody in purchasing, somebody at the VP of supply chain ops, whatever it may be, in a larger company, and it's like your goal is to make them look good. Does it alter when you're actually speaking with the owner, and the owner is it's not about looking good; it's about making the business better?
Well, I mean, I think that if you take that same attitude with the owner. Look, now my goal is not to make you look good. My goal is to make your business run better.
Right.
My goal is to, I think Warren Buffett said, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. Right. So, look, my goal is to reduce your costs. Okay, that may reduce a little bit of my revenue, but my long-term goal here is to be, indispensable to you. And if I become indispensable to you, then long term, I'm going to make a lot more money than trying to just get fat off of one or two deals. Right? So that owner needs to know that I'm there looking out for his best interest.
Right.
And if I'm looking out for his best interest, he's going to keep coming back to me. And by the way, owners sometimes open other companies or Or this purchasing manager skips and goes to another job. When he gets that other job, first thing he'll do is going to call me. Say, hey, BJ, can you help me out over here? I need to look like a hero at my new job.
Right.
And I know BJ makes me look like a hero. And so if you take that approach that like your job is to make them look good. It's not to get over on them. It's not to, try and, you don't have to wine and dine people. You just have to, sometimes it's no more complicated than just doing what you said you're going to do.
Right.
Right. You don't have to overcomplicate it. But knowing that guy can call you and trust you, that you're going to do everything you can to make, better for him.
Yep.
That's what matters. And not that you're going to, gorge him. He's not going to call you if you're going to gouge him every time, he comes to you and you're going to try to get rich off of every deal. It's the long-term vision. Like long-term, I got to be there for you.
Right. So there's an interesting, like the way you came up, you mentioned military service. Mm-hmm. And I feel like what really helps, probably helped you in that, in the corporate. I mean, obviously you're very smart, capable, hardworking, but there's also that kind of like fitting within the mold and doing things as they're supposed to be done. Certainly was probably pretty finely honed at the time coming out of the military. Mm-hmm. And so you have these nice, this kind of, it really does make sense to go from, military service up to corporate logistics, corporate warehousing. And then now you make the jump to this more entrepreneurial role. What is it like? So what were the things that, there's this saying, it's like, what got you here won't get you there.
Right.
Yeah. So what were the things that you had to change, not only in your thinking, but what were some of the key, like, how did you become good at logistics? Because obviously before that you were good at logistics, but also at logistics while following orders. And then now in kind of this newer role, certainly you have a direction that you're going, but
well, yeah, I think it's, and I would say this to anybody, it's a willingness to learn and listen, right? You gotta, a mentor of mine many years ago said, you gotta wake up every morning trying to know what you don't know. Mm. Right. So if you know what you don't know and you're willing to go out and ask questions and listen and learn from everybody, I mean, there's so many different aspects to logistics. And I've been very fortunate to have been sometimes dropped in the deep end of water in some of those different forms, whether it's drayage or long haul trucking or LTL trucking or warehousing and e-commerce fulfillment. I mean, there's so many different aspects. And
sure.
And I think the true person who wants to be successful has to be, first off, know that they don't know it, admit to that they don't know it, and then go seek out and find the guy that does know or a gal that does know and ask them and learn from them. I think that's the thing. And I think that if you want to be successful and you want to take that next leap, you have to be I call it a learner for life, right? You got to always want to learn something new. And that's where I've been very fortunate. Very fortunate. Sometimes, I was just dropped in the deep end. Hey, here this is, figure it out. And then on some cases, it was, leases. I sat next to my boss and he walked through a lease with me and said, okay, here's a guy who's been doing it for most of his life. And he's walking me through, this is what you look for. This is what this is the watch outs. Here you go. And you got to soak that in. You got to, take that and run with it. Trucking, got dropped off and, hey, you're in charge of this terminal now. What? What do you mean? I don't know what the heck a terminal is. And so you go in there and you leverage the people that are working there, and you don't go in there too big for your britches, and admit what you don't know and ask questions. And you find that most of these people love teaching you. I mean, I've sat with dispatchers and say, I don't know how the hell you do this. Show me. And they'll show you. They're proud of what they do, and just be willing to be humble and talk to them and learn from them. And it's awesome. I think that's what I love about this industry. There's something new to learn every day. Mm-hmm. Every day. And from anybody. You don't know who it is. It's like, I love touring warehouses. I'm a total warehouse nerd. I love touring warehouses because I can't recall ever touring a warehouse, no matter what size. I didn't see something and went, oh, that's a pretty damn good idea. I like that. And it's usually something that somebody there on the floor came up with or some supervisor came up with. It's not some crazy wazoo engineering thing. It's some simple thing that some warehouse, worker or person just said, here's a better way to do it. And you see that and go, well, that's a good idea. I mean, and I can't remember walking a warehouse, but I'd see at least one thing go, oh, that's a good idea. And so there's always something to learn if you approach it from that. It's like, I think the biggest leap for me was when I leapt out of even the 3PL world and started my own company.
Right.
Because you just don't know how many hats there are to wear until all of a sudden you got to wear all of them.
Yep.
I think, particularly, I was VP level kind of guy and had been for a number of years, and you forget that what you're relying on, all these different people that are, doing these ancillary, functions all around you, making your life better every day. And then you go into the true entrepreneurial world where it's you. I don't have a risk manager handling all the insurance stuff.
Yep.
You don't have an HR person. You don't have
a legal. I mean, you might not do all your legal, but you're doing a lot more legal than you were beforehand.
Yeah.
You're reading through all your contracts. You're doing the HR piece to the extent that you can, or finding the person who can do it, understanding how to coach them. It's everything. It's wearing a bunch of hats.
It's a bunch of hats, and also, you find those things that throughout your career you never really did get into. Like I was a career operator. My entire career. I was never a sales guy. Never once. I mean, I had sales guys that reported to me at different points in my career, but I was never the sales guy. And now, guess what? Now I'm the sales guy.
So I do want to back up because this is an interesting thing. It's like you start of being exactly what you said, that operator. You're kind of marching in line, and then you get a little more entrepreneurial, and then you just full on go and do the entrepreneurship thing.
Right.
How, what was it? When did you start feeling like, I'm going to do this? I'm going to do this for myself. Were there any stops between NFI and other logistics companies?
Yeah. I mean, I think that probably a million guys out there, you start noodling on a business plan. I don't even remember the first year I did it, but, probably 5 or 6 years before I started the company, I started, on my off hours, sitting around noodling on a business plan, putting a business plan together because I'm thinking I'm figuring this out. And wow, if I can make money for, someone else, why couldn't I do this for myself? So, and I always say that I think a lot of times there just has to be that impetus, that thing that pushes you off the edge, right? So you have this business plan, you've been dreaming about it and thinking about it like a lot of guys do, and then I left. And if I went to work for a private equity firm, and it was just one of those things that circumstances led it. I was traveling 99.9% of the time. I was working 100 hours a week. And
how was your family?
It was
life,
terrible,
right?
Terrible. I was probably on the verge of divorce. I mean, it was horrible. It was horrible. And then you throw right in the middle of all that the 2008 crash, and I'm big wig. I'm the COO of this company, and like, oh my gosh, it's nuts, and I'm never home.
Yep,
I'm never home. I tell this story a lot that it was May of 2009, and I'd been gone for 3 or 4 weeks. I'd been gone from home, and my wife is on the phone. I'm at the Newark, New Jersey airport. And my wife's on the phone giving me the play-by-play of my youngest son's baseball game, his playoff game, and they win the game, and hey babe, I got to run. She hangs up. We'll call you later. Hangs up. Everybody screaming and laughing and going crazy in the background. And when she hung up, I said, "This sucks." And the guy across from me, I was in the Delta Lounge there, and the guy across from me goes, "I agree." I said, "Did I say that out loud?" And he goes, "Yeah, something sucks." And honestly, I just that night, it was that push, that look, I'm missing out on everything, and come on, you can do better than this. So I literally stayed up all night long and wrote myself out of a job. at my company. I wrote a whole new organizational plan, wrote myself out of a job, presented it to the managing partner and my boss and said, I'm just kind of done. And to be very fair, they were very good to me and we worked through it. But that's when I just said, I got to go do something. And then, I went and hiked the Pacific Crest Trail for a while, for a day, and came up with the idea of Pacific Mountain Logistics. And that's where the name comes from, this hiking on the Pacific Crest Trail.
That's cool.
And it's kind of, been a roller coaster ride since then. But that was 2009, and so I started the process of putting the company together, and then we were operating in January 2010.
Wait, what month in 2009? That was May?
I filed all the paperwork in July.
Got it. Okay.
I filed for the DBA and the LLC in July. I got the LLC in September, I think like September 9th, when all the paperwork came back. And then we did our first shipment January 2nd, 2010. January 4th, 2010.
Yeah. Did you raise money or how'd you get it off the ground?
Well, originally out of my my savings and back pocket, we shoestringed it. And remember, this is 2009. Nobody's lending, anybody anything. Then I brought in a partner, I think about February of 2010. I brought a partner in to help. The upside is in 2009, 2010, if you fog a mirror, they'd lease you a building. There was building and equipment and stuff around, very cheap. And part of the impetus too was I'd read, a million self-help books that talked about, businesses that opened up during a recession because the barrier to entry was very low.
Yep.
Couldn't have been much lower than it was in 2009. I mean, you'd talk to somebody about putting something in a warehouse and they would just, they were clamoring to you, oh, take mine, and also talent. I mean, there was a lot of talent around, underutilized or not utilized. And so getting quality people was, an easier thing. I mean, it was tough. I mean, we certainly bootstrapped it and, we got some money here and there from, like I said, from my partner, brought some money to the table. But yeah, for the most part, we just some loans and a lot of savings and wiping out your 401k and it's worked out.
That's outstanding. So comparatively, and I mean, I do think there's a lot to be said for, it's a lot easier to start a business when everybody's hungry.
Yeah.
It's a great, it's a great thing. How do you see, so I mean, we're, depending on which news article you read on any given day today, we're headed for doom and gloom, and then, maybe it's not as bad as we thought. We're seeing kind of these kind of big waves, like these, almost like these sine functions going up and down and up and down with what's going on. So how do you think the environment is different today than it is in 2008?
Several things. First off, I think the biggest difference today versus, any other time is that, credit's been tight since 2008. The freewheeling credit has never really come back. Not like it was 2005, 2006, where, again, if you could, put together coherent sentence, it'd loan you $1 million, and put you in a house that you had no chance of ever really being able to afford. And so, I don't think credit's ever loosened up that much since then. So I don't think you have a bunch of bad credit out there. Then you look at the unemployment numbers. I mean, the participation rate is still so pathetically low. And there's so many jobs out there, unlike 2008 when, the unemployment rate was double digit and climbing, right? Mm-hmm. So everybody still has jobs. I mean, so it's not like that's there. Housing hasn't fallen off the cliff. And from everything I've read and everyone I've talked to, no one believes it will because inventory is still painfully low. We never really recovered from the pandemic. The construction never caught up, due to supply issues and labor issues and so on. So it's not like there's a big glut of houses out there. So that's not going to cause housing to fall off the cliff. I think it'll moderate and it'll come down. The interest rates are going to force that way. And so you back that up into the rest of the economy is so the housing market doesn't fall off the cliff. Then, your home improvement stays pretty good because people start to stay put a little bit when housing's expensive, and housing's still very, pricey. So people stay put, and so they fix up what they have versus buying something new. So that, bodes well for your home improvement, which I think people don't realize how big a chunk that is of the economy. People have been pent up. So obviously travel and leisure is doing really well, and all things point to that. I mean, at some point, fuel has to come down. I mean, that's probably the thing that's causing the most, consternation out there is, travel and leisure would be doing much better if the fuel prices would come down.
Oh, I mean, with that said, I paid below $4 today at the pump down the road, and we're in sunny Southern California,
right? And gas is diesel's staying up there though, and that's what has kept the overall freight rates from coming down dramatically. Is diesel has been stubborn, sticking that. And I just drove across half the country, and it's the same price. Doesn't matter where you go.
Yeah,
I mean, diesel's is still in that mid fives, all the way across the country. So
even in Texas, I
noticed it. Yeah, absolutely. Well, gas was much cheaper in Texas.
And gas, I think, was $2.69 when I left about a week ago.
Yeah, I saw that just 2 weeks ago in Texas. So the fuel prices come down. It bodes well for the travel and leisure section. Restaurants have they've rebounded quite a bit, and you don't see a lot of that, mitigating. So while I do think we're in for a little bit tougher than what we've had, I mean, we've been on a pretty good roll here. And you're starting to see volume draw back, durable goods and have drawn down, and you've seen some, delay of purchasing. But, you got this artificial spike in 2021, which it's kind of hard for everybody to understand. I mean, this was not normal. The government threw so much money into the economy, and everybody went out and spent like a girl getting ready for prom. Everybody went and spent so much money. 2020 is an arc, and 2021, is an anomaly. And so, I think the inventory glut is people did their production planning around that 2021 spike and planned based on that. And you get into 2022 when things are a little bit back to normal.
Right.
And now you have this big inventory glut.
Yep.
Because you just made too much, right? It's not that the economy's bad. It's just getting back to normal, and all this, government funding money is out of the equation, or at least is leaking out of the equation.
For now,
right? And so, once you get that out of the equation, you get back down. I think what we're seeing is just a return more to a normal economy, not a off the chart. I mean, supply chains are starting to open up, and so car availability, so car prices are coming back down to earth, and that's just an availability thing. It's not that, oh my gosh, the car market's crashing. No, it's not. It's just now you can actually find a car.
Yep.
It was an availability issue, not so to me, I look at it and see all these artificial spikes that were just, ballooning things up are going away, and yes, it may be a recession in terms of comparing it to 2021, but let's compare things to 2019. I think that's where you go back and say, let's compare to 2019 and see where it is. And I think you're going to see it's still moderate to good, decent growth over 2019. And we're just back down to a more normal pace. That's the way I see it. And that's, reading and talking to a lot of people that are way smarter than me. I think that's to me, from what I understand, that's the consensus. We're just going to get back down to a more normal pace. They'll keep raising the interest rates, which look, we've gotten a little drunk on cheap money.
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
So the entire world has gotten a little drunk on cheap money. So, if the interest rates leak up to 8-9%, it's probably not the end of the world. And they'll, get things back kind of steady state and they'll come back down.
Sure.
But we're not seeing the 1980s with 18-19% interest rates.
Fortunately.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because what I'm seeing, and this is bringing it back, I mean, that was an excellent, I think, view of like the macroeconomic trends and everything. And that plays so much into how you and I plan for our businesses. Mm-hmm. And so now I'm looking at the Chinese numbers going down for the exports. We're seeing a lot of big drops in exports. We're seeing the Port of California is heralding themselves for getting, they have no container ships waiting.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're on time, and I'm like, oh, I mean, a lot of those got offset to the East Coast, which is now consequently having issues,
major issues.
Like I think I haven't seen recently, but I think Savannah was up 40s, 50s.
Yeah,
offshore waiting to get in.
And to put things in perspective, 40 vessels off of Long Beach and LA is 2 weeks worth of work.
Mm-hmm.
40 vessels off of Savannah is about 7 weeks worth of work. You always got to put things in perspective.
Right.
40 vessels off LA and Long Beach is really not that big a deal.
Right.
40 vessels off Savannah is a huge deal.
Right.
Charleston, even a bigger deal.
Yep.
This diversion, and I've talked to some retailers that did this, that diverted to the East Coast, and they're all regretting it because East Coast just can't handle it. Particularly smaller ports. You get outside of New York, New Jersey, all these other ports, they're just not, they're landlocked. They don't have the capabilities that you have in Long Beach, LA. And so their product was on the water longer. It cost them more to get there. And now it's hung up.
Yeah.
I'll leave their name out. I talked to a big retailer who says, they estimate maybe 20 to 25% of their Christmas just wasn't even going to make it.
Wow.
Because they shipped it to the East Coast, and that's just, that's the risk they took.
Right. So, and you mentioned this at one of the longer, I think it was 2 or 3 times ago we met, and you mentioned that what we'll see the East Coast cooling, and that'll cool, and then it'll basically take about a year, and then we'll see the West Coast start to calm down.
Yeah.
You still think that's where we're headed? Absolutely.
I always judge. It's funny. You can judge the market by who's calling you. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I think for, at least a year there, I don't think the real estate guys even had an outbound line. They weren't calling anybody, So now they're calling, they're emailing, they're sending you flyers. You're getting flyers out of Chicago and Kansas City and Phoenix and Dallas and a few other areas. You're not seeing a lot still in Southern California. Southern California is still tight and it's going to, quite frankly, I just think Southern California is going to be tight forever.
Yeah.
I really, I think a lot of people thought that, and me included, thought that there'd be a much greater easing of the inventory glut during Christmas than there has been. We've got a couple weeks left to go, but, there's really hasn't been much easing and there's so much pent up demand here that, I was talking to a large real estate guy the other day, and, he's seeing some easing in that 200,000 square foot, to 100 to 200,000 square foot range. He said, but anything over 350 or above, there is none. There's no availability and there's no forecasted availability. Anything that's under construction is already spoken for.
Yeah.
He said, there just isn't. And quite frankly, they're running out of decent land to build on.
Well, they're running out of permitting. California.
And the NIMBYs and the warehouse moratoriums and all those things. It's just kind of coming to roost. And so, I think a lot of people felt like Southern California would ease at some point. I don't know that that's true anymore. The people I talk to, and again, I talk to people that are way smarter than me that say it's just, there's all the indicators say no. Some of these other outliers, I think you and I have talked before, you have your major markets, right? I call them the primary distribution points, which in my brain are, Southern California, Chicago, the Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, that area there, Pennsylvania, a little bit New York, New Jersey, but, I really like that Lehigh Valley area. I mean, if you were going to only have one warehouse in the United States, I would have it one of those three markets. And so, and then you get your secondary markets, Kansas City, St. Louis, Indianapolis, Dallas, Memphis. I know it torques people that thinks Memphis should be a primary. It's not. Not in my brain. Atlanta, to me, those are all secondary markets.
Phoenix, Nevada,
Vegas. I actually put Phoenix and Vegas in tertiary. I wouldn't even think I'd put them secondary. I really wouldn't. I mean, and again, and that's a big generalization. It really depends on what you're distributing and how you're distributing it. Well, if you're doing parcel 100% B2C, then Phoenix and Vegas make a little more sense. But if you're doing mainline distribution, retail type distribution, where you need LTL and truckload, those become problematic. You got to look for that east and west and north and south, corridors to run out of.
So then my question becomes, as long as Southern California stays extremely tight, then, your next closest markets are Phoenix and Vegas.
Yeah, Phoenix, Vegas. You got, you're going to start seeing some movement in the Central Valley of California.
Right.
Move up there.
And they've got that, the new inland port that was just approved, a few months ago.
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out. But so you'll see that. You'll see more into Phoenix and Vegas. I think you're going to see more into Phoenix first. Vegas seems to be, struggling to get buildings built over there. A lot of pent-up demand in Vegas. And
right. Well, the thing I think Phoenix and even Tucson has going for it is proximity to Mexico.
Absolutely. And the more nearshoring you get, the more that reliable that becomes. And quite frankly, coming across Nogales area, is way easier than coming up through, San Ysidro or the Otay Mesa crossing. So way easier to get into Phoenix and go through Nogales than it is to come up through San Diego through either Otay or San Ysidro.
Right.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. Phoenix is a great market if you're coming up out of Mexico. The dray into there is expensive, and again, it kind of comes back to there's not a lot going back. And
right.
They used to have a big yard there, Hanjin, when Hanjin was, still a steamship line. They were terminating boxes over there because there was so much waste paper coming out of Phoenix, going abroad. But ever since China quit taking our waste paper, that market's kind of dried up. But no, I you're spot on. And again, you generalize and say, okay, these markets are great. But again, goes to, you got to look at what your specific needs are. Again, if you're doing B2C, one of these secondary markets work great for you because pricing is usually a little more accommodating. And if I'm shipping out parcel, as long as I'm close to an airport,
right, who
really cares? That's where then you just start looking at population trends and where can I be? So Vegas makes a decent, sense. And Phoenix makes good sense. Indianapolis, I like Kansas City, St. Louis. I think those are both great markets.
Right.
So you look at what you're doing specifically versus, just generalized. But the other thing is a lot of people, a lot of companies don't have the sophistication to split inventory.
Right.
It takes a lot of sophistication to split inventory across the country. And you got to relook at that. So you're only going to have one warehouse. You want to be in the most cost-effective, place you can be.
Yep. Really enjoy that perspective. I want to switch gears a little bit.
Okay.
So when you launched, what year was it that you launched Pacific Mountain?
2009.
Okay, so 2009. From 2009, when you got going, when did you really start seeing some of the big changes in how people were operating or have tried to operate warehouses? What have been some, I know there's, of course, the Amazon effect that enabled third-party sellers and everybody to be an entrepreneur with much,
right.
Much less of a barrier to entry. What have been some of the changes, I guess, you've seen in the last 10, 15 years?
Well, you go through these cycles, right? So I used to always jokingly say, when I first got in the business, shipping a case was shipping a gross, and most people don't even know what a gross is anymore. First thing you saw over the last 15 years was how that the shippable unit size has shrunk so much. As retailers got rid of their back rooms, they didn't want, they didn't want 12, they didn't want 144 for sure. They wanted just enough to fit on the shelf, right? So just enough to fit on the shelf, that's it. And so, one thing you saw just in warehousing in general was that pack size, reduce. And then you get B2C comes along, and now you only want to ship one of them, right? And you want to repack it, even. So, there's just this big shift in, you went from truckload to LTL to, like early on when I was first in the business, it was really rare to ship less than a pallet. If a retailer was going to buy a pallet, they needed to buy at least a pallet's worth. And even before that, it was buy a truckload worth. Then okay, I'll let you buy a pallet's worth, and now then a case worth or layers worth. We used to have layer limits. You had to buy an entire layer, and now it's, can I buy one of those? And so, that's been a big change, right? And then where else, particularly we'll just focus on the third party side of it. You had a lot of people have gotten in the business, and at third party logistics, you've got everything from the GXOs and NFIs of the world to the Bob and Tom's warehouse. Bob and Tom were truckers who had some customers say, "Hey, can you store this stuff for us?" Yeah, sure. And they're running it with a yellow notepad and shipping orders out. So you have this gamut. Now, come about 2000, I call it about 2014, when you really saw this surge of these new, fulfillment houses. Kind of following that model of, one price, here it is, we'll process it no matter what kind of thing. And there's really, it's funny, when I first started the company, I got a lot of advice from people who said, you got to do e-commerce. So I was very fortunate. I knew some guys, and I traveled around and went to a few different e-commerce warehouses and talked to them. They were owners, and taught them what they thought. And the thing was, all of them said, "Hey, can you teach us how to do retail compliance stuff?" Because we're not making any money at this e-commerce thing. It's a very tricky business model to do straight e-commerce. And so I think there are a lot of people in that space. I think there's a lot of people in that space that don't make money. And the people that do make money are making it on the arbitrage off of parcel rates because you got some crazy parcel volume or there's some parcel deal. But that's still a very, very strong market. But what you look at, that's still, all e-commerce, the fulfillment is still less than, I think today, it's still less than 22% of the total distribution market. So you got this whole, more than 2/3 of the market is still retail distribution, and that comes in different phases now. Now with the, Amazon FBA, you're still shipping. It's like shipping retail compliant, but you're shipping to Amazon for e-commerce fulfillment, but you're just fulfilling their warehouse, and so it's still LTL, it's still pallets, and still, but the makeup of those are very different than they were before. A lot of case pick, a lot of each pick still, even in that retail distribution, you're still doing a lot of each and a lot of handling. Robotics have come a long way in the last 15 years. You're seeing more and more of that, particularly in the 3PL space. A lot of the autonomous bots that, two-person and two, either product to person or person to product kind of thing. So that's, very flexible. It's better than conveyors in a lot of cases, particularly in 3PL, because you use a lot more flexibility.
I think this is an interesting point here because, just to say it a little bit more blatantly, everything here, it's not replacing workers. It's reducing. You can reduce your workforce to an extent, but this is more about
productivity.
Yeah, this is about augmentation more than replacement.
And I think that you're right, Mark. That's a really good point to make. And it's one of my soapbox items is that, look, 25 years ago, we were talking about how there was going to be this gap in labor when all the baby boomers retired.
Mm-hmm.
And now, not just the baby boomers, but you got the, whatever it is, Gen Y. I don't know. I get lost in all those.
I think it's X, Y, Z.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
So, and millennials and all this other stuff. But we knew that there was going to be a labor shortage because the baby boomers didn't have any kids.
Right.
So we knew that there was going to be a labor gap. 25 years ago, we said that. And I think I can remember the first conference I was in, they were talking about how are we going to deal with this labor gap that's going to happen. Now, the miss was most people thought that was 2030, 2035. That was always the conversation. But now COVID comes along and it exacerbates the whole issue. A lot of early retirements, people getting out of the workforce. And now, so you have a low workforce participation rate along with this labor gap. So this idea that automation is going to replace everybody is insane. It's barely going to help make up for the gap in labor shortage that's already there by making people more productive. And quite frankly, I heard someone say the other night at an event, reduce the suck in the building, right?
Mm-hmm.
So make the work suck less.
Yeah.
So it's gonna help and augment the worker and help them be more productive and take some of the more, we'll call them mundane tasks out of the way.
Right.
So this idea that it's going to replace workers is crazy. If anything, it's going to increase the number of higher paying jobs because now someone's got to work on them.
Yep.
And someone's got to program those silly things. They don't just, they're not programmed themselves yet.
Exactly. And so it's interesting that the first economically viable robot that Boston Dynamics came out with was Stretch. I think that's what they're calling the container unloader.
Yep.
Which is using suction technology and in any warehouse, I feel like I would prefer to sweep the floors than unload a container.
You're not alone.
I mean,
you're not alone.
Yeah, and I mean, and I've been in the can before. You have. I mean, that is a hard job. I don't care.
There's no reducing the suck in that one.
That's right. And so to have this robot come in and augment the workforce, I mean, they still got
to sort it. They're still going to have to do. They're still probably going to have to, in a lot of cases, palletize it and sort it and label it and receive it. I mean, but
unwedging that top carton off, at the top from the top of the container.
Pretty crazy.
It is.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, and I find with the automation that if I went to Modex, I think it was in March, I believe it was in Atlanta, and the thing I find very interesting is that everybody is focused on the automation around the individual pick or bin pick. Nobody's focusing on the actual automation around pallets. Mm-hmm. And so when, in warehousing, I think there are a couple tenets: maximize your cube. So use as much possible space as you can use, floor to ceiling, wall to wall. And then also you want to reduce the amount of walking for your employees.
Travel time.
And that's what a lot of those kind of like Segway looking bots, I think 6 River Systems.
Six River, there's a bunch of them.
There's a bunch of them.
Fetch, robotics.
Right. But what's interesting is you don't see very many companies trying to eliminate aisles, trying to, it's like those certainly help with the amount that the amount of walking that's happening in your building. And maybe your aisles can go a little bit smaller. You can have now a lot more levels to your pallets, but there's still a significant amount of space that's left.
Yep.
And I've always been surprised that there's not more automation around the actual pallet and at the carton and around the carton side of things.
Yeah, I mean, you see that like in the grocery industry, they've got some pretty neat automation stuff at the pallet level. There's some of those autonomous bots that you can they'll go as far as loading the pallet on a truck. They've got conveyor tops and they'll slide the pallet right off the top. And there's some of that. That's expensive though still. And you got to have the right size building. That's the other thing. A lot of this automation, it's about getting the right circumstance, the right customer, the right, setup to use it. But so much of the automation, then you go to the automation that is, in my mind, semi-useless. I've been to, I'll leave their name out of it, a really highly automated warehouse, and they have auto tapers, and then they had 5 people with tape guns in their hands going around fixing the boxes coming out of the auto tapers. And it's like, what is that? So we can't keep mechanics and got to adjust these things. And okay, so why don't you just have people taping them then?
Yeah.
And auto labelers and some of those same issues. And, I'm against automation for the sake of automation. I like automation that works and automation that, that's why the autonomous bots are nice because they're kind of like a conveyor, but they're more flexible because I can change the pattern. I can send them wherever I want. I don't have this big monument thing that's in the way, a conveyor. They're pretty good. In fact, I saw a demonstration one the other day. It was a trash bot. And so what they were doing was they were working in an area that had they were detrashing this stuff and repacking, and it had a bin on it, and you throw it in the bin and the thing understands when the bin's full and it goes to the dumpster, dumps it, and comes right back, automatically. No one has to engage in it, anything. And
so no longer at 3 p.m. do you have the 2 guys that are going around unloading all
this
your
one
bins.
just goes and does it. It knows when it's full and dumps it. So there's a lot of really cool, unique things, in that environment that, again, reduce the suck, but, go to some of these highly automated warehouses that Amazon operates and they say, wow, this is one of their most automated facilities and it only has 800 people that work here. Okay. I mean, how automated is it? I mean, distribution is still going to require people to be involved at some point.
Right.
We're just not to that point. But again, you look at the labor shortages there are today. I think what they say yesterday, 10 million jobs unfilled nationwide. So you need the automation to fill that gap.
Yep. To enhance it. So let's just, let's say you're planning, you've got a 10-year plan. You don't have Pacific Mountain Logistics, but you've got a box. How big is the box? How are you going to build it out? And what kind of customer set are you going to put in there? Like how do you go from an empty box to a business that you think is your ideal mix based on all of your experience?
Well, I mean, I think the ideal box is at, 250,000 square feet. If you're starting off, I mean, if you've got scale, you might go to 350, but I've found that everything over 350, there's some diminishing returns there. But 250 to 300 probably, if I was, gonna, start fresh and start over. That was probably where to be. I would have a mix of clients that are primarily omni-channel. I just don't like the, from a profitability standpoint, a business standpoint, the pure B2C players. There's just too much volatility in that market and too much commoditization in that market. So it's really tough to be consistently profitable with its only B2C. So I like the, call them omni-channel or, supportive e-commerce, what you want to call it. But, and we have I have plenty of those clients now that are shipping big box retailers. They're drop shipping, through Amazon. They're shipping to Amazon and they're doing their own B2C. That multifaceted client. That's what you're looking for. The holy grail is counter-cyclical business, patio furniture, in the spring and coats and jackets in the fall kind of thing. So you're always looking for those counter-cyclical clients. I like, I kind of fell into it, but, the food component, it gives you, that year-round cash flow, year-round business. Also forces you to keep your warehouse clean.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of that. But, those omni-channel clients, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for those that, and also you want that wraparound. You want a client that I can help them with their transportation. I can help them with their all their different services they need, and you're trying to wrap around that client as much as you can.
So in that vein, once you've got your warehousing piece taken care of and I know you're such a fan of very narrow aisle racking.
I hate that stuff.
So this is a question. I mean, if the idea is to maximize the cube, why don't you do it by having more narrow aisles?
Again, I go back to, I want that mix of omni-channel, right?
Okay.
So omni-channel, retail, they're going to turn. It's going to be higher velocity. The very narrow aisle is just not conducive to high velocity unless it's completely automated. So I call them turtle trucks. Those turret trucks, they're just not very fast, or you can't move a lot of freight in the very narrow aisle. You pick up maybe 15. If you're in a 40-foot clear height building, you may pick up an extra 20%. Storage. But what does that cost you in labor?
Yeah.
That labor component's not going away. And to me, very narrow aisle. Unless, and you go back to, I don't want a client that stores or stuff. I want clients that turn. But if I'm if I've got 150,000 SKUs and I'm storing, less than half a case of every SKU, it may be very narrow aisle works.
But in that case, I think you would almost want to go with something like one of the solutions, like the modular storage-based thing, like AutoStore, for instance.
Yeah, exactly.
They would be, in that, you're not going to get better compression than that. You're not going to get better space utilization.
But if I'm a logistics knucklehead starting to start a 3PL, those things require a lot of capital investment.
They do.
And while they're really good, and if I'm a shipper and I can guarantee I've got volume on those that fits those for evermore, that's great. But if I'm a 3PL and you signed a 3-year deal with me, and I'm going to invest, $1.5 million in a modular system, $2 million, more likely, that payback can be crucial.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to look at it that way too. It's from a business standpoint, from an entrepreneurial standpoint. What's my biggest payback? And labor is a consistent cost I'm going to have. I can set my pricing so the building pays for itself. That's not that hard to do. But if I put a very narrow aisle, it's really tough to relay a warehouse, and the labor expense to me outweighs the space you gain.
Right. So I've looked fairly extensively into it, and you're not far off. 27% is what you're supposed to gain, and over a 10. That's looking at a 10,000 square foot block. As for instance, it would allow you to put, let's say, if you could get 100 pallets in there, now you can get 127. So to your point, it helps, but what are the downsides? And I think you summed them up very well. So then, as we look in, all right, so you've got your customers now. The next question was, what's the first wraparound service you put around your warehouse, your storage, your in and out?
Well, I think the first thing you do is you got to get that, software integration with them, right? Mm-hmm. So you want that hook into a client. You want your software to be fully integrated.
Yes, absolutely.
That's the first and foremost. Some people skirt around that and don't force that, but you got to force that, make sure that, and that is a service, and that is something that, some people just aren't very good at making sure happens. And then you go for the transportation.
Got it. And LTL, FTL, or does it matter?
All of it. I mean, whatever they're doing, drayage, out of the port, if they don't have door-to-door contracts, if they have door-to-port or wherever they have, I mean, inbound, I want to handle their inbound and I want to handle all their outbound I can. It becomes difficult, some of these clients, like Amazon and so on, they're managing their own transportation, collect freight, but all that discretionary freight, I want all of it.
So what's interesting about the Amazon thing you bring up, and this is we've learned. So we've got some customers that use, our third party will work with Global Trans, we'll work with C.H. Robinson, whoever it may be, to gain, to get a full truckload from here to ONT8, for instance. And it's like the prices aren't too different just right off the cuff, like when you look at them. But where the customers really end up getting hosed is detention fees at Amazon. Because if you're doing a full truckload, it is almost unheard of that they're going to get unloaded at the time that they're supposed to get unloaded, and they're not going to have detention time. And so, but whereas you use that, if a customer uses Amazon Partnered Transportation, it's the big blue truck, they don't get charged detention time. Amazon understands that this is the rate. And so there's this very, very interesting, it's like...
Well, they're trying to force you into using their...
Of course they are. Yeah.
If I were them, I'd probably do the same thing.
Yeah. It's evil genius smart.
It really is. There's always those risks.
Yeah.
And you want to do the right thing by your client.
Of course.
But, the more you can wrap around, the better you can get.
Yeah.
And again, also, forget just the business side of it. The more you wrap around, the more you understand your client, the easier it is for you to help them.
Mm-hmm.
Easier it is for you to work through the problems together and understanding what their issues are. And so, the upside for the client is now you're more invested in them than you would have been otherwise.
Right.
And understanding every facet of their business. So, we even try to get in on the steamship line stuff if we can. Through our partner, freight forwarder partners. So, again, the more the more you can help them.
Right. So, what is the very first? And this can be very light automation. What's the very first piece of automation? Whether it's pallet wrapping machines, whether it's anything.
I hate pallet wrapping machines.
Yeah.
Yeah, because unless you're going to have 20 of them, 30 of them, everybody's got to drive to a specific point.
Mm.
And, unless you're doing something that requires really heavy wrap, I've found most hand wrap can compete. And it's flexible and it's, wherever you want to be. The automation piece, I think, that gets overlooked is the data automation, the making sure that your WMS is doing everything it can do. RF guns in the warehouse and scanning things in and out of location, not, eliminating all those manual events that happen, scanning onto a truck, cameras on trucks. So, I can prove that I loaded this time. And then, I think cameras on trucks now is a big deal.
And so that's just aimed down at every single, when something backs up.
Yeah, well, on the inside too. So on the inside, being able to see in that truck and say, look, this time this truck was here and I loaded it, I scanned it on, and here's a picture of me putting it on.
Yeah. So that might be a better, that's so in the nuts and bolts, that might be better to talk about offline.
Yeah.
But
automation, first off, data automation,
right? Systematic
automation, and then you start looking at things like box erectors. If you're doing a lot of repack, you start talking about the autonomous bots. I think to me they lead the pack in their flexibility. So I have 15 of them, and on Monday I need all 15. On Tuesday I only turn on 8 of them. On Wednesday I turn on 7 of them, and and they give you that bandwidth, and travel time is a eater, and anytime someone travels outside their area, then it's never as simple as just travel out and travel back. They're going to see a friend. They're going to stop off the restroom. They're going to, there's all those things, those little minor productivity eaters that are in that. But if you keep them in their work area and the bots are doing all the traveling back and forth, I mean, that's a big productivity gain.
Yeah. What separates a good warehouse from a great warehouse?
It sounds silly to say this, but, organization, it really does, having a plan, knowing where things are and having, putting things away with a plan, clean warehouse. I always say that you can't tell if things are wrong if everything, if everything isn't clean. In a warehouse, everything should have a place and it should be in its place. And when I walk a warehouse, it should be very easy to tell if something's out of place. And if everything's put away like it's supposed to be, everything is where it's supposed to be, it's very easy to tell when things are askew. And so the great warehouses, have, and I'll go back to this, it's the people. The great warehouses have good people that question, why is that there? Why is that there? There's only two safe places for freight: in a location and on a truck.
Yeah.
And everything in between, things happen and things go wrong. And so, you need to have a clean, organized warehouse so that when your supervisor, your manager, whoever's walking the building, it's easy to see something out of place. And you have people that question it. Why is that out of place?
Right.
And so to me, that's the biggest delta between a good warehouse and a great warehouse. Is a great warehouse stays clean and organized. People, don't accept things out of place and they question when things are out of place. A good warehouse, they try.
Yeah.
And to me, and again, it's the simple things. I had a mentor of mine tell me once, it's never the elephants that get you, it's the gnats. It's the little things that you let slide and you just let slide and let slide. They eventually suck the blood out of you.
I think there, in this vein and all of our previous conversations, there are two big things that have come that are kind of in this, like on this topic. One of which you said, it's like, especially as we go into potentially a recession and really more, as you established, maybe a normalization. But you always make your biggest detrimental mistakes when everything is slow.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
Yeah. And then the other thing that you've always told me is so few operators actually understand their costs.
Right. You've got to understand your costs. You got to live it and breathe it and understand every penny that's spent out there. You better know it and understand it. And particularly when it's going to slow down because, things happen. Everything is cyclical. I don't care. It's the old saying, it's never as good as you think it is. It's never as bad as you think it is. Right. So, and we've been riding a high for the last couple of years. Even through COVID and all that. Again, that government money, it's floating out there. But as we slide back down, you're fine as long as two things. One, you didn't get drunk on that free money and spend it willy-nilly. Yeah. And secondly, your costs and you can understand as you ratchet down as volume slows, where the pinch points are and where the things, the discretionary money is and how to control it and take it out. And what your profitability is per client. That's the other thing. It's really key, particularly in the 3PL world when you have multiple clients in a building. That's probably the holy grail is making sure that you know what clients are profitable and tracking that all the time because you got to remember, you have several microeconomies in your building. Each one of those clients is fighting their own battles with their sales and what they're doing. And if you don't watch that and stay on top of that, next thing you know, now they're unprofitable because they've changed or their clients have changed. Or, their sales have changed. They're not turning like they were. And if you're not watching that all the time, it can get away from you really quickly. And next thing you know, that's impacting your bottom line because you weren't watching what they were doing. So That's really important that understanding your costs and understanding how that's in fact affecting each one of your clients individually.
Okay, so, and I'll say this is going to be the last question. Looking into your crystal ball, the next 5 years, what are we in for?
I would say that it's good to be in logistics. I mean, I think the industry is really, to me, it's really funny. When I first, for the first probably 20 years of my career, I spent, people ask me what I did. I spent the next 30 minutes trying to explain it to them. So, I jokingly say logistics finally got sexy. So now that I can't remember the last time they turned on the news, they didn't say supply chain at least once in the telecast. So, I think logistics is a good space to be in, particularly as retail morphs. I mean, I think the death of brick and mortar is widely overstated, and I think that's brick and mortar retail is not dead by any stretch. But the emphasis on logistics and the emphasis on how things get to where they are I don't think that's fallen out of focus anytime soon. So it's a good time to be in the industry. It's a good time, from a career standpoint. From a business standpoint, I think over the next 5 years, it's going to continue to morph. Automation become more and more of a factor. You're going to see, there's always cost realizations, right? So I always say that the cycle is, that everybody's trying to cover their balance sheet. And the next thing you know, everybody's trying to spend because they got too much money on their balance sheet, and so you'll see this ebb and flow of outsourcing and insourcing of logistics. But, I think as you move forward, and particularly with this, still a large number of people working remotely, the reticence to bring logistics back in-house. I don't see that. And I've seen some telltale signs of people that are trying to push it away. They don't want that, they don't want that liability on their own. They want somebody else doing it. So I think you'll see continued growth on the 3PL side. You'll see more consolidation. You're going to see the bigger guys gobbling up the smaller guys. That trend, I don't think is going to stop anytime soon. But I think the next 5 years, normalization of the economy, higher interest rates will stick around for a few years, at least 2 or 3, which I don't know that that's a bad thing. Again, the drunk on low money, on cheap money, I don't know that drives the best practices.
Sure.
Businesses. I think, I think the next couple of years, you'll see some weeding out of some of your bad actors and the guys that just don't run quality companies. I think you'll see some of that. And that slack will be picked up by the better operators.
Yep.
I think some of these, I call them money eaters, some of these startups that are out there, quote unquote, changing the landscape or disruptors. I think those will disappear, as people are as money's not cheap anymore. I think these guys out there that are just eating up money from people, I think there'll be some consolidation in that environment, and a lot of those guys will go the way of the dodo bird.
They probably all went VNA too.
Probably all went VNA. That's their problem right there. But I think that's what you're going to see the next 5 years.
I would be remiss, and so I lied. That's not my last question. This will be one of my last questions. Amazon warehousing and distribution came out, or they're in the process of rolling out. I don't know a ton of details, but it seems like they're trying to
3PL.
Yeah, effectively. And I don't know how many hundreds of millions or how many millions of square feet they have, but I'm guessing it's all inland. I'm guessing it's still not going to be cheap.
No.
And it seems like, to me, I don't know what your read is on it, but it seems like this is them overcommitting to a lot of square footage. And then now what in the heck do we do with it?
Right. There was an article that came out, a few weeks ago that said they were going to send all this square footage to sublease. And that was, you talk to the guys in the know and they went, no, they're not. Basically they overbuilt and it's really funny. I had a great perspective. I'll leave his name out of it, but he's a big player in the real estate market and does a lot of business with Amazon. He said they overbuilt their labor bandwidth. So they had buildings, but they just didn't have the bandwidth on the management side to get them open. They were behind recruiting and management, and they just didn't have the bandwidth to open them. So it wasn't so much just a pullback of space, but it was also a pullback of resources. So they felt like they were spread too thin.
Right.
And so, Amazon's Amazon, and I'm critical enough of them in general, but I think if they get into the 3PL space, it'll be the one thing Bezos set up is the siloed sections of everything is a silo, so it's easy to try it and unplug it. My opinion is they'll try that and they'll unplug it pretty quick, because they'll find that they don't have that product profitability to offset their logistics inexperience. I'm sorry, they're not. There's a lot of people out there that have forgotten more about logistics than Amazon knows.
Yeah,
I mean, Walmart could teach them a lot about logistics.
Yeah, I'm sure they could.
And I don't see them as some crazy, awesome logistics provider. And so I think they get into the 3PL space and they'll find that they're not as good as they think they are.
Well, I think that's a great place to end it. I thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
This is fun. I'm looking forward to getting more into it.
Good.
I'll pick your brain on some other people I should probably talk to.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I mean I love it because we're able to kind of get in the nuts and the bolts. And
you gotta get Summit Hogue on this thing.
What's that?
Gotta get Summit Hogue on this thing.
Oh, he's coming next.
There you go.
Yeah, Summit's got a great perspective.
He does.
That's how you and I met.
Yep, smart kid, and no, it's and I think this is a great format, and there's a lot of smart guys out there doing this and gals that are way smarter than me that that look at all this from different angles. You got to look at the real estate guys, you got to look at the development guys, you got to look at the 3PL guys, and you got to look at the shipper guys. So they got a very different perspective too.
Yeah. Well, it's a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
It's always good to talk to a fellow Texan.
Absolutely. All right. With that said, thank you.
Thank you.